Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into something really core to business finance.
That's right. It's one of those ideas that, well, everyone in business really needs a solid handle on.
We're talking about break-even analysis. Specifically, we're drawing from Chapter 28 in Unit 3, Part 2, Costs and Break-Even Analysis.
Yep. And while it's key IGCSE material, honestly, its importance goes way beyond exams. It's just fundamental business sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, think about if you're running anything, a small Etsy shop, a cafe, whatever. Why is it so critical to know exactly how many items you need to sell?
Well, it really boils down to survival, doesn't it? Until you sell that specific amount, you're actually losing money because you haven't covered all your costs yet.
So break-even is that baseline, the point where you stop losing money.
Precisely. It's the bare minimum just to keep your head above water.
And understanding that point is also key to figuring out when you might start making a profit. So our goal here is to really unpack this concept using the source material, look at how it works, how to calculate it, what it tells you.
And what happens when things change, like costs or prices. And just a reminder, if you want more resources on this stuff, check out www.igce-business.weebly.com.
Great. So let's start with the absolute basics. What exactly is the break-even point?
Okay, so simply put, it's the level of output that's the number of units you make and sell where your total costs exactly match your total revenue.
Total costs, total revenue. Got it. So zero profit.
But zero loss, too. That's the key. You've earned just enough to cover every single expense you've had.
Okay. And to figure this out, you mentioned needing some specific numbers.
Yes, three main things. Your total fixed costs, your variable cost per unit, and your selling price per unit.
All right, quick refresher. Fixed costs, these are the ones that don't change much, right? Like rent.
Exactly. Rent, maybe core staff salaries, insurance premiums. Whether you sell one thing or 1,000, those costs tend to stay put for the period.
Okay, and variable costs.
These ones move up and down directly with how much you produce. So think raw materials for each item, maybe piece rate labor for assembly. More units means higher total variable costs.
And selling price per unit, that's just the price tag on the item.
That's the one. So once you have those three figures, the formula for the break-even point in terms of units sold is fixed costs divided by the selling price per unit minus the variable cost per unit.
Ah, okay. And that bit on the bottom, selling price minus variable cost per unit, that's got a specific name, doesn't it?
It does, and it's really useful. It's called the contribution or contribution per unit.
Contribution, what does that represent?
It's the amount of cash you get from selling one single unit after you've paid for the direct costs of making or buying that specific unit.
Right, so after the variable costs are covered for that one item.
Yes, and that leftover money, that contribution, its job is to help pay off your fixed costs. Think of fixed costs as this big lump sum you need to cover. Each unit you sell contributes its little bit towards chipping away at that lump sum.
Okay, that clicks. So each sale helps climb the mountain of fixed costs.
Exactly. And once the total contribution from all the units you've sold adds up to equal your total fixed costs, boom, you've hit break even.
And any contribution after that point.
That's profit, pure profit from each additional unit sold.
Let's make this real with that example from the source Ed Winchester and his fire alarms.
Good idea. So Ed's annual fixed costs are, let's say, US $20,000. That's maybe his van, tools, insurance, basic stuff.
Okay, $20 fixed.
He charges US $25 per installation. That's his selling price. And the variable cost for each job, maybe the alarm unit itself, is US $5.
Right, so his contribution per unit is $25 minus $5, which is $20.
Perfect. Each installation contributes $20 towards covering that $20,000 fixed cost hurdle.
So now the formula. Break-even point fixed cost, $20,000 divided by contribution per unit, $20.
$20,000 divided by $20.
Comes out to $1,000.
So Ed needs to do 1,000 installations in the year just to break even.
What does it really tell him?
It tells him that 1,000 is his magic number. If he only does 999 installations, he's actually lost money over the year.
But at 1,000, he's paid for everything. All costs covered.
Exactly. And then installation number 1,001, that $20 contribution is now profit. Number 1,002 adds another $20 profit, and so on. Knowing that 1,000 target is, well, it's crucial for his planning.
It really focuses things. Now, sometimes people use charts for this, right? Break-even charts. We don't need to draw one, but what do they show?
Yeah, they're a visual way to see it. You basically plot your costs and your revenue against the number of units you sell. You'll have a flat line for fixed costs.
Because they don't change with output.
Right. Then a line starting from that fixed cost level and sloping upwards, that's your total cost line, fixed plus variable. And then another line starting from 0 and sloping upwards, that's your total revenue.
And the important bit is where the total cost and total revenue lines cross.
Precisely. That intersection point is the break-even point on the graph. Everything to the left of that point where costs are higher than revenue, that's the loss zone.
And to the right.
Revenue is above cost, that's the profit zone. The chart makes it really clear visually how profit or loss changes as your sales volume changes, all relative to that break-even level.
Very clear. And related to this, there's another term, margin of safety. What's that about?
Ah, yes, margin of safety. Super useful concept. It's basically the difference between your actual sales, or maybe your planned sales level, and your break-even point.
So it tells you how much sales could drop before you're in trouble, like a buffer.
Exactly like a buffer. It's your wiggle room. The calculation is simple. Actual or planned sales volume minus break-even sales volume.
So for Ed, if his break-even is 1,000 units, but he's actually planning or expecting to install 2,000.
His margin of safety is 2,000 minus 1,000, which is 1,000 units. It means his sales could fall by 1,000 installations before he starts making a loss.
A bigger margin of safety means less risk then.
Generally, yes. It suggests the business is operating more comfortably above that danger zone. It's a key indicator for risk assessment.
Makes sense. Okay, so we know how to find the break-even point, but things change in business, don't they? Costs go up or down, though you change your prices. How does break-even analysis help with that?
That's where it becomes a really dynamic tool. You can use it to see the impact of those kinds of changes. Let's walk through a few. What if the selling price changes?
Okay, say Ed feels he can charge more, maybe bumps his price up to $30 per installation instead of $25.
All right. His variable cost is still $5, so his contribution per unit goes up to $25, $35. Now each job contributes more towards those fixed costs.
So he doesn't need to do as many installations to cover the $20,000.
Exactly. With a higher contribution, the break-even point decreases. He needs fewer sales. On a chart, the revenue line gets steeper and crosses the cost line earlier to the left.
Okay, and the opposite. If competition forces him to lower his price, say to $20.
Now his contribution drops to $15, $25. Each job contributes less. He'll have to do more installations to pile up enough contribution to cover the $20 fixed costs.
So the break-even point goes up. Needs more sales. Makes intuitive sense.
Right. Higher price, lower break-even, lower price, higher break-even, assuming costs stay the same.
Okay, now what about costs? Let's start with fixed costs. What if Ed's van lease payment goes up, pushing his total fixed costs from $20,000 to, say, $22,000?
Well, now that fixed cost hurdle is higher, his contribution per unit is still $20, assuming price is $25, but he needs to cover a bigger total fixed cost amount.
So again, he needs more sales.
Correct. He needs to sell more units to generate enough total contribution. The break-even point goes up. On a chart, the total cost line just shifts upwards, crossing the revenue line further to the right.
And if he managed to cut his fixed costs, maybe found cheaper insurance, fixed costs down?
Break-even point goes down. Lower hurdle, fewer sales needed to clear it. The total cost line shifts downwards on the chart.
Got it. Lastly, variable costs. What if the price of the actual fire alarm units he buys goes up? Say his variable cost per installation rises from $5 to $7.
Okay, price is still $25. Now his contribution per unit shrinks to $25. Less contribution from each sale.
Which means more sales needed to cover the fixed costs.
You got it. Break-even point goes up. On the chart, the total cost line gets steeper because the variable cost component is larger, so it crosses the revenue line further to the right.
And if he finds a cheaper supplier, variable costs drop to $4.
Contribution goes up to 21 offers, $4. More contribution per unit means fewer sales needed. Break-even point goes down. Total cost line gets flatter on the chart.
Wow, okay. Seeing how all those levers affect the break-even point really shows why it's such a useful planning tool. You can model different scenarios.
Definitely. But, and this is important, we need to remember it's a tool with limitations. It works by making some simplifying assumptions.
Ah, the fine print. What kind of assumptions?
Well, a major one highlighted in the source material is that it assumes costs and revenue behave in a perfectly straight line. They're linear.
Which isn't always realistic, is it?
Not always, no. For example, maybe you get discounts for buying raw materials in bulk if you produce a lot. That would mean your variable cost per unit actually goes down at higher volumes. Your total cost line wouldn't be straight, it would curve.
Or maybe you have to offer discounts to customers who buy large quantities.
Right. So your total revenue per unit might effectively decrease at higher sales volumes. making the revenue line curve too. The simple straight line model might not be accurate far away from the break-even point itself.
Okay, so linearity is one simplification. What else?
Another big one. It assumes that every single unit you produce is actually sold.
Ah, but what if you make stuff and it just sits in inventory?
Exactly. The calculation is based on units sold generating revenue to cover costs. If you produce enough units to hit your calculated break-even output, but half of them are unsold in the warehouse, you haven't actually brought in enough revenue yet. You haven't truly broken even in cash terms.
That's a really important distinction. Production isn't revenue.
Correct. Also, for businesses selling lots of different products with different prices and costs, break-even analysis often assumes the mix of products you sell stays constant.
You mean like you always sell 50% of product A and 50% of product B?
Sort of, yeah. It assumes that ratio doesn't change. But in reality, customer demand shifts. Maybe you sell more of your high-profit item one month and more of a low-profit one the next. That changing mix can mess with the overall break-even calculation if you're just using a simple average.
Right, that makes sense. And I guess, like any calculation, garbage in, garbage out.
That's the fundamental one, isn't it? The accuracy of your break-even point is completely dependent on how accurate your cost and price figures were in the first place. If your estimates are off, your result will be off.
So it's a foundational tool, but used with care and awareness of the assumptions. Okay, let's test understanding with a couple of questions for you listeners based on what we've covered.
Sounds good. Okay, first one. Let's say a business has fixed costs of US $500,000 a year. They sell their product for US $25 per unit. The variable cost per unit is US $15. How many units do they need to sell to break even?
Okay, think about the formula. Fixed cost divided by contribution per unit. What's the contribution here? Selling price, $25. Variable cost, $15.
So the contribution is $10 per unit.
Right. So $500,000 fixed cost divided by $10 contribution per unit.
That gives you 50,000 units.
50,000 units. That's the number they need to hit to cover.
If costs go up, maybe their rent increases significantly, what typically happens to their break-even point.
We talked about this. Fixed costs are that hurdle. If the hurdle gets higher,
you need more contribution to get over it.
you need to sell more units. So the break-even point would increase.
Exactly. It shifts to the right on the chart. Higher break-even quantity.
Perfect. So just to wrap up quickly then, we've looked at what break-even means, that zero profit, zero loss point.
How to calculate it using fixed costs, variable costs, and selling price, focusing on that idea of contribution per unit.
We touched on how charts visualize this, showing loss and profit zones relative to the break-even output.
And explain the margin of safety, that vital buffer showing how far sales can fall before losses kick in.
We also explored how changes in prices or costs shift to the break-even point, making it a dynamic tool for planning.
And crucially discussed the assumptions about linearity, selling all production, constant product mix, and the absolute need for accurate data.
Right. So it's clear that despite those limitations, break-even analysis is a seriously valuable, fundamental tool. It gives businesses essential insight into costs, volume, and profit.
It's often the starting point for financial viability checks.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given those simplifying assumptions, particularly linearity, when might relying only on this simple break-even calculation be particularly risky for a business? And what other kinds of analysis might they need to get a fuller, more robust picture of their financial situation?
That's a good question to ponder as you delve deeper into business finance.
Definitely. And don't forget, for more resources covering IGCSE business topics, including more on costs, finance, and break-even, you can always visit www.igcse-business.weebly.com.
Thanks for tuning into this deep dive with us.
We hope that's helped solidify your understanding of break-even analysis. Catch you on the next one.